This week on Jerusalem Dateline, a look at Operation Breaking Dawn, the three-day conflict between the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Israel, where more than 1,000 rockets were fired at the Jewish state. Plus, Whose Land, a film investigating the legal foundation of the State of Israel. And the University of Auburn basketball team visits the Holy Land, where the players head from the court to the Dead Sea. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. A truce between Israel and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad ended 3 days of fighting on August 7th. It began with a preemptive strike against one of Gaza's strongest terror groups that also sent a message to its sponsor, Iran. Here's our report from the Israel-Gaza border. Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid met with defense officials, marking the end of Operation Breaking Dawn. The action started Friday afternoon.
It began when we received intelligence, clear, certifiable intelligence, that a mobile terrorism unit was moving towards the border with Israel with large anti-tank missiles. They were going to be fired at residential cars, possibly school buses, heading down one of Israel's major roads. We were successful in eliminating that threat before they could carry out the terror attack.
Israel's targeted strikes also killed the military head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad in northern Gaza and hit other selected terror sites. The terrorists responded by firing hundreds of rockets from Gazan civilian areas into Israeli communities near the border, up the coast to Tel Aviv, and just outside Jerusalem. You see, get another one going out right now. This is That's the Iron Dome. There's two going off. You can see that right now, streaking in the sky. CBN News witnessed the Iron Dome anti-missile system intercepting 7 of the rockets. According to the IDF spokesman, the Iron Dome had a 97% success rate. Nearly 200 of the rockets fired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad landed within Gaza, causing a number of injuries and deaths. On the Israeli side, most communities have bomb shelters, like the 20 provided by CBN Israel in strategic locations, such as the community of Yesha, just 4 miles from the Gaza border.
We have many surprises. You're not prepared. You're on the way to some place, and we have this bomb shelter on the way. It calms the children and gives them the security to go to the tennis court and play a little.
The front lines of the conflict, known as Operation Breaking Dawn, are here on the Israeli-Gaza border. But behind the scenes, one of the main players is the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Iran is kind of the backyard of all of these organizations. They are train them, educate them, sponsor them. So Iran play a very, very important and critical role in our region for many, many years by these proxies. And the jihad is one of the main radical Iranian proxies in our region. The jihad, without the Iranian support, they are really non-relevant.
During the 3 days of fighting, the civilian head of Palestinian Islamic Jihad was meeting with Iranian leaders in Tehran. After Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is the second most powerful group in Gaza. The U.S., UK, and a number of other nations have designated them as a terror organization.
Their very mantle, if you read their charter, it says that they cannot allow the existence of the State of Israel. That's what they're trying to do.
As you saw in our report, we talked with IDF field spokesman Doron Spielman about Operation Breaking Dawn. Here's more of our interview with Spielman and what people need to know about the dangers Israel faces on a daily basis. Expand on who is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Who are they?
So Islamic Jihad is an organization that is funded and controlled out of Iran. They've been around for a number of decades. They operate in Syria and Iran and also in the Gaza Strip and Judea and Samaria. Their goal, their express goal, is to destroy the State of Israel. Their funding, their training, their weapon supplies, those 600 rockets that they're firing, those were all locked and loaded and ready to fire. and they are an organization that have a number of heads. The head of the organization right now is conveniently located in Tehran, where he's able to watch this from behind a TV screen, right? So he's not even here while his troops are bombing his own people and also bombing the state of Israel. We've seen over the last 6 months a buildup of Islamic Jihad in this entire area. We've carried out very precise and precision arrests in Jenin of some of their top militants. We've now neutralized their northern commander in Gaza and their southern commander in Gaza. We've uncovered yesterday a terror tunnel that was on its way into Israel. Could we imagine, God forbid, had that reached into Israel, maybe it would have come up under a home, inside a schoolyard. You don't build a tunnel that long unless you're really planning on carrying out a mass attack. And that was neutralized yesterday. So we know who they are. The mask has been pulled off. We are holding them responsible, and we will continue doing this until their entire capabilities have been neutralized.
So here we are just a few miles from the border, really the front lines of the conflict right here. But is Iran the main actor behind all of what's going on here?
Yes, the Islamic Jihad is part of the long arm of Iran, which is supporting global terrorism throughout the world. They have a number of assets that they place in the area around Israel. Islamic Jihad is Iranian controlled and funded. It's their long arm. It's located in Gaza and Judea and Samaria with the goal of targeting Israeli civilians. If you look at us, on the other hand, Israel, I mean, this is not like a football match where everyone's playing by the same rules. Our rules are to try to eliminate Islamic Jihad and neutralize their capabilities and not harm the citizens of Gaza.
How many people does it affect when rockets are coming this way? We're talking hundreds of thousands, more than 1 million people that are affected by this, either living in their shelters or leaving the area.
There are, throughout Israel, again, these rockets have hit the areas of central Israel. They've put millions and millions of people within the line of fire. Some of those people in these communities are being hit in and out every second. They've got trauma. They're suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. My own daughter lives in one of these communities. She works with these children. These people are in the front line.
If you had to explain the situation to somebody in the U.S., thousands of miles away from this situation, how would you explain what's going on here?
Could you imagine, is what I would say to them, your own city, whether you're in New York, California, Tennessee, wherever you are, could you imagine hundreds and hundreds of rockets raining down in your city, children looking for shelters from an enemy that says they don't want your city to exist? That is their very charter. And you look at this enemy, and you see they're firing from behind men, women, and children, from kindergartens, from hospitals. And you say to yourself, you know what? We can't just wipe them off the map. We're not going to put civilians in the line of fire. And in the most specific, pinpointed, and intelligence-guided way, you're able to go out and neutralize them. That's what we're doing, and I can sleep well at night because I know that we are defending our own people, providing them with a good, solid sense of peace and security in the future, and we're doing this while trying to protect the people of Gaza, which Islamic Jihad seems not to care about.
Any final thoughts, Doron?
My thoughts are that, again, the IDF calls on Islamic Jihad, on the people on the other side and people around the world to see that they are the perpetrators of this attack. We value human life. Most of your viewers value human life. Islamic Jihad does not value human life. And we can see it by their actions, both against Israel and both against their own people.
An Iranian national with ties to that country's military is accused of attempting to assassinate former high-ranking United States government officials. The FBI says the murder-for-hire plot involved killing former President Donald Trump's national security advisor, as well as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. George Thomas has details of the foiled plot.
In October 2021, Shahram Poursavi, a member of Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard, reportedly offered an FBI informant $300,000 to eliminate John Bolton, who had served as National Security Advisor to former President Donald Trump.
The facts we allege are clear and chilling.
According to the Department of Justice, the 45-year-old Iranian operative from Tehran had his agents conduct surveillance on Mr. Bolton's office and residence. Court documents say Poursavi didn't care how Bolton was killed, but that his group would need video proof of the target's death.
Through the hard work of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces, we were able to detect this heinous plot and disrupt it.
Poursavi, who never visited the United States, reportedly offered the informant another $1 million if they would carry out an additional hit on another top Trump administration official. The Wall Street Journal says the intended target was former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
This is an especially appalling example of the government of Iran perpetrating egregious acts of transnational violence in violation of U.S. laws and our national sovereignty.
According to the DOJ, the alleged murder-for-hire plot was likely retaliation for the 2020 U.S. drone strike that killed the head of Iran's elite Quds force, General Qassem Soleimani.
We face a rising threat from authoritarian regimes who seek to reach beyond their own borders to commit acts of repression, including inside the United States.
I can say I'm not the only one that the Ayatollahs in Tehran are trying to assassinate. So this is the kind of government we have in Iran.
Bolton says the plot, which began a year after Soleimani's death, shows just how dangerous Iran is.
This is a murderous, lying regime. It's an enemy of the United States, and we need to treat it that way.
Poursavi, who remains at large abroad, is now wanted by the FBI on charges related to the transnational murder plot. If convicted, he faces up to 10 years in prison. George Thomas, CBN News.
Up next, a new documentary tackles the question at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict: whose land is it? When it comes to the heart of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, the same question of whose land it is keeps coming up. A new documentary goes back in history to answer this pressing question. For many around the world, including the United Nations, Israel is an occupier on land stolen from Palestinians. They often chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free."
Because from the river to the sea means Haifa and Jaffa.
This is part of the strategy to delegitimize Israel. Not only is there a biblical mandate for the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, but there's a legal foundation as well.
Producer Hugh Kitson's new film, Whose Land, disputes the accusation Israel is illegitimate by stating a legal foundation established more than 100 years ago. At the 1920 San Remo Conference, the victors of World War I divided the Middle East. The result included a British mandate, reestablishing a homeland for the Jews. The preamble states, whereas recognition has thereby been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and to the grounds for reconstituting their national home in that country.
I believe actually what happened at San Remo and in the mandate back in the early 1920s was God putting the title deed of the land of Israel to the Jewish people and enshrining it into national law.
Colonel Richard Kemp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, narrates the film.
You frequently get the narrative that Israel has no legitimacy, Israel is occupying territory. And this film shows that that's not the case. It shows that Israel's sovereign territory is legally its sovereign territory. And it is not illegally occupying anything. It is not, there are no illegal settlements. There is just a false narrative against the state of Israel based on falsehoods.
Camp adds many Jews and Christians need to know the true story of Israel's legal right to the land.
And I think this story, this film, plays a major role in educating people about the truth and about what the reality is compared to the narrative that is shoved down everyone's throat by the media, by some human rights groups, by the United Nations, by the EU and various other international bodies.
The film cites other experts, including international law professor Avi Bell.
Simply putting out the basic facts about what happened to whom when, why it is the Jewish people have legal and historical and moral rights to their homeland in Israel. It turns out this is of fundamental importance. It should be obvious, but it's not.
Many, including the Biden administration, continue to push a two-state solution as a resolution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The long history of Palestinians rejecting this proposal leads Kemp to believe it's not what they want. In the meantime, he says, the campaign to delegitimize Israel carries global implications.
Not only does it affect Israel, it kind of discredits Israel's reputation for those people who believe it, but it also fuels and incites Jew hate around the world. And we've seen examples of that in the United Kingdom, in the United States, and other European countries, all fueled by this anti-Israel narrative based on lies.
Coming up, see how one ministry is helping families along the Gaza border cope and survive under the constant threat of rocket attack. While a ceasefire appears to have ended Israel's most recent fighting with Islamic Jihad, the threat of rocket launches against southern Israel still exists. CBN News' Julie Stahl shows us how one family and her community can better deal with the situation, thanks to help from CBN Israel.
Galit Kadosh and her family live on Moshav Yesha, one of many Israeli communities not far from the Gaza border. When a rocket is fired and red alert sounds, they usually have about 15 seconds to run to their in-home bomb shelter. During the last conflict, Galit heard the explosion only 6 seconds after the alarm.
We love the area. It's good for us. But you have this situation. Again, you're under pressure, you're in stress. It's impossible to get used to this situation. Every red alert, you get a cardiac arrest and crazy pressure.
Her daughter Ella saw her 11th birthday party canceled last week due to the lockdown.
It doesn't matter how much you live with this and hide, you are panicked each time. And there's nothing to do about it. I, for example, am very, very sad because I had all sorts of fun things planned to do on that day, and it was all canceled.
The stress can be even higher when the alarm sounds and residents are away from home. Daniel Carlson says that's where CBN Israel stepped in to help.
Well, I would say that probably the very top priority for any resident of that area is the issue of security. They know that the issue of rocket fire, spur of the moment, very short notice.
In just over a year, CBN Israel has provided 20 bomb shelters in strategic locations around the Gaza Strip. This one is next to a tennis court about 4 miles from the Gaza border.
We were able to take bomb shelters and strategically place them near bus stops, kindergartens, community centers, swimming pools, anywhere where people are congregating, and so that they can get to a shelter at a moment's notice, because that's the way life is built down there.
Galit says the one placed in her community delivers a great benefit.
First of all, thank you very much. It's not something we take for granted. We have many surprises. You're not prepared, or you're on the way to someplace, and we have this shelter on the way. It calms the children and gives them security to go and play a little.
Ella says even though the situation is scary, she's thankful for the protection.
The children in Gaza, they don't have a red alert. They don't have a shelter. So I have to say thank you that we have this.
Although it's quiet for now along the Gaza Strip, residents have the reassurance that if or when rockets fly again, the bomb shelters are here to reduce stress and save lives. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Moshav Yesha on the Israel-Gaza border.
Up next, the University of Auburn basketball team visits Israel. They hit the court with Israeli teams and see the land from the Dead Sea to the River Jordan. Recently, the University of Auburn basketball team visited Israel. It's the first of what many hope will be other U.S. college basketball teams coming to the Holy Land.
I believe it's going to be, and I don't know. You know, we've kind of called it birthright for college basketball, but I don't want to take away from the birthright name, because that's for Jewish kids to come back to their homeland. But when you say it, I think people get the idea of what we're trying to get accomplished. You know, I'd also like to somehow tie it to the Abraham Accords. Like, why not stop over there in Bahrain or UAE on the way over? A couple games there, then a couple games here. And again, just normalization of relations. And so we'll see.
Bruce Pearl is the winningest coach in Auburn's history and one of only 4 Jewish college coaches to take his team to the Final Four in the NCAA basketball tournament. He sees sports as a common denominator.
It brings people together. It brings teams together. It brings universities together. It brings communities together. And, you know, sports obviously is a way it's brought us together.
He rallied this group of Israelis.
God has blessed us. He's chosen us. And with that's a responsibility. Just like I tell my players, you got to represent the name on the front of your jersey. That's Auburn. You got to represent the name on the back of your jersey. That's your family name. But you also got to represent God's children, the Jewish people. You got it with how you act, with how you study, with how you love each other, what kind of neighbor you're going to be. Let the light continue to shine upon you and shine upon all of our people.
The Auburn team played a number of exhibition games with Israeli teams. They also got to tour Israel, from the Western Wall, the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, and many got baptized in the River Jordan. For many, like Dylan Cardwell, it was their first trip to the Holy Land.
Insane, you know, just seeing the Bible come to life and being able to tour Jerusalem my first day here and just see the route that Jesus went on before he was crucified and seeing the stone that he was anointed on. I'm just so glad I got to experience that stuff and just see the life that Jesus has lived and how it's impacted billions and billions of people, like 2,000 years down the line.
After college, Cardwell hopes to play in the NBA, then enter the ministry. His time in Israel is bringing the Bible to life.
Can't believe I'm here, you know, after reading so much about it and studying so much about it, and just hearing about it from my friends and my family and my small groups and my church and my community. It's just insane to see it come to life. It's a big blessing, bigger than I can ever ask for. And I'm just so grateful to be able to experience it. And it's a beautiful land. It's just so much. It's just I ran out of words to explain it, but it's a beautiful land.
It was great to see the Auburn team here in Jerusalem. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blasts so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.